How's it going, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Dyson Sphere Program. Hope you guys have been enjoying the series so far. If you guys have, you guys know to do, smash the like button. If you haven't already, consider subscribing. And if you have any questions, comments, or concerns for me, leave those down below. And with that, let's get into today's episode. So as usual, we are struggling with power problems, so I'm going to go ahead and throw down a couple more of these mini fusion reactors. These are quite good. At some point, I am going to actually start using the Dyson Sphere's power that we get. Not sure when, but at some point. As you can see, we did just get another achievement, 600 megawatts of power. I do want to try to maybe start going for some of those as we continue, just because I figure, you know, we might as well, right? Honestly, part of this episode, we mainly just focused on cleaning things up. So finishing off by removing any of the builds that are in the way on that side of the bus, or I guess the main production area. I don't really think I would call it a bus, but just this production area. So that's going to include some of these crystals and the titanium glass and just other things that are no longer rather in use, I suppose, anymore. I do want to try to get green science going again. However, in order for us to get green science functioning properly again, we're going to need a couple things that we don't currently have fully set up yet. And unfortunately, that's just the nature of things, right? Also, part of my goal this episode is to kind of just go around and clean up some of these storage caches that I have lying around. Now, that's our primary one, but as you can see, there's just all sorts of junk just laying around, and I've pretty much just decided anything that I'm going to use to like expand the factory, so whether it's a assembler or a belt or a power pole or a wind turbine, all of that's going to stay pretty much on my person, just so that way I can use it, even if it's not necessarily directly needed, right? So like wind turbines, for instance, we can pretty much probably pull all of the ones we have down up, but it's free power, and unless I need the room, I might as well just leave them down. So a couple other things is we do want to continue to try to expand the oil fields. Now, I do have pretty much enough oil, like mining capacity. However, I don't have enough oil wells tapped, if that makes sense. So there's, I have enough of the machines I need. I just don't have enough of the actual oil spawn things. Also, I did read a couple comments about how we are pretty much guaranteed the resources. However, as to their specific spawning, that is pretty much random, which is good, right? It's good to know that we can get all the resources, just they're not necessarily in ideal positions, which is better than not having them at all. Because I know in Factorio, that's pretty much a similar case. Is you're still guaranteed the resources, they just might not be in the ideal positioning, which I'm okay with. Speaking of Factorio, I'm really excited for what they've been showing off in their Friday facts, because for those of you who've been following Factorio and for as long as I have, since back, way back when the just the overall graphic style of the game looked almost nothing like it does today, will certainly know that Factorio has started posting again about their updates, because they were not really on a hiatus. They were still working. However, they just haven't been releasing any information about the game, particularly because they were focusing on what's next, basically. Because Factorio is very much in a very good state. It's pretty well optimized. It's a fairly solid gameplay loop. It's plenty of moddable content and a fairly strong modding community. So the modding community has definitely kept the game alive for a lot of it, but the game itself, even just vanilla, is a really solid game. I think I'll probably end up actually doing a playthrough of it just to highlight how fun it is, even at the vanilla level, even if you don't play modded, which quite frankly, I do think everybody should play vanilla first and then mod it however you want, because quite frankly, play the games you want to play the way you want to play them. So whether that's modded or in creative mode, or maybe semi-creative mode, right? So maybe you give yourself like flying, or maybe you give yourself more of something. But again, play the games you want to play the way you want to play them. As long as you are like, if you're playing a multiplayer game, like PvP, okay, you can still play the game the way you want to play it, but there does come with a little asterisk there, because if the way you're playing the game intentionally ruins the experience of another player by either exploiting or using cheats or modding in a negative way, then sure, you're playing the game the way you want to play it, but now does everybody else want to also play that way, of basically being curb stomped because you feel like it's fun and it's your way of playing? But there are some limitations to that, in my opinion. But Factorio is finally announcing more stuff about their upcoming DLC, and from my understanding is it's pretty much just taking the game to a whole nother level, quite literally. So the way it currently works is you basically crash land on a planet, similar to RimWorld. Speaking of RimWorld, after either this series or the Minecraft series finish, whichever one finishes first, will be replaced with a RimWorld series, a vanilla, no modded, beginner-friendly series. So just like the one that's currently up on the channel, however, the only caveat is the one that's currently up on the channel kind of left off on a cliffhanger. Part of that is my fault, just because when I started it, I didn't realize how long it was going to go for. And at the time of starting it, I had some trips already planned. And so when I took those trips, I didn't preemptively record. And then when I got back, I had no idea where I was. And I wasn't motivated to continue the series. So unfortunately, that series just abruptly ended. So I feel like, to do it justice, I'm going to basically recreate that series and finish it this time for sure, and then go on to modded and of course just other topics for it. Because the thing I've noticed most with games is you'll see games have pretty good core gameplay loops, and that's why they're fun, right? And then you'll have a modding community come along, and they'll usually prop the game up for several more months or even years. And if they do it correctly, then there's a lot of synergy. There's a lot of just the core gameplay loop is just enhanced with mods. But then I also see games, unfortunately, go the route of the mods just don't necessarily fall off, but you don't have the same level of dedication anymore, right? So it's pretty important for the mods to keep being dedicated to the game and keeping the game alive. However, in a game like RimWorld, what ends up happening is I feel like everybody you see only plays modded, or they only play modded a very specific way. And so then if you're somebody who's new to that game, who just discovered it, but you want to learn how to play the vanilla experience, you know, I don't want to say the way the game was intentionally designed, or rather the way the game was intended to be played, right? Because sure, the devs probably intended a specific way to play the game, but at the end of the day, you're the player and you should play the game you want to play the way you want to play it. So by all means. And so that's kind of why I think vanilla in anything, right? Just the plain Jane, the vanilla version of a game, the core gameplay loop, I think those things need to be highlighted. Even just every so often, every major update, in my opinion, I think is something I'll try to do. Not necessarily with every game, because obviously that would be too hard to do, but the games that I'm interested in. So whether it's Factorio or RimWorld or this, for instance, they're all very interesting, and I think at some point or another, if there's content that brings me back, especially if it's a significant enough change to where it's like, oh, this feels pretty massively different, or if there's a new gameplay loop that changes due to a DLC, or the gameplay loop changes because they changed it outright. Those are things that I would love to highlight to players, because I feel like, sure, they kind of get highlighted and modded, but at the end of the day, if they're not made abundantly clear, like, hey, this item was added because of this mod, or this mechanic that you're seeing was added due to a mod, and then a player buys the game or plays the game with unrealistic expectations of now seeing this feature, but that feature is actually a mod, and sure, they could go get the mod, but that might not have been why they bought the game. They might have bought the game because they wanted to play a vanilla experience, but that's not what they're getting, right? So, in that long tangent, I find it beneficial to have vanilla playthroughs for you guys, and I've definitely seen that expressed pretty heavily by some of you. And so that's kind of what we're gonna do. Is if it's a new game to me, or even if it's just a new game to the channel, my goal is to do a playthrough of the game vanilla at some point. Maybe not necessarily first, like in the case of Factorio. I jumped right into modded with that. But for the most part, my goal is to have a vanilla playthrough of the game somewhere up on the channel at some point. Now, does that mean it's going to happen immediately? Probably not. I'll probably start not all games. Like RimWorld, I started vanilla. I'm gonna start another series in vanilla, and then we'll move on to modded. But I do want to continue to highlight the aspects of a game in vanilla, so that way there's not unrealistic expectations of what the gameplay loop is or what the game is, because I don't want to recommend a game to somebody and say, hey, this is the game, and all they see is added complexity, where I see just added complexity, but that's something I enjoy, right? And that's something with Factorio, because I unfortunately did that to my friends. I played Factorio vanilla for the longest time, loved it to death, highly recommended it to everybody, but nobody got it. Well, then I got into modded. Still same thing. I kept recommending the game. This game is amazing. Everybody should get it. It's really fun. If you're into this type of game, you should get it. Well, my friends finally got Factorio. Well, I was playing modded at the time, so that's all they saw me play. And they thought the game was that. Now, they knew I had some mods, but they didn't realize that a lot of the core gameplay that was changed was because of mods. And so when they started playing with me, they thought what they were playing was vanilla. So when we eventually did do a vanilla playthrough, they were completely lost because they didn't realize what was and wasn't a mod. And that's what I think modded playthroughs do to the player base. It is just a disservice, as if you don't make it clear what is or isn't a mod, it makes it harder for a new player to buy the game and to play a game, because then again, they get unrealistic expectations, and then when those things don't turn out to be in the vanilla game, you get an angry viewer. And I don't want to do that to you guys. I want to make sure that you guys are as informed as I am about something, right? And maybe even further, and hopefully we can all kind of come together and share what we've learned about a game, share those resources, and hopefully everybody kind of improves their experience a little bit. Because, like, I'll definitely come out and tell you, like, I'm not an expert in pretty much any game, except for maybe Factorio. But even that, I'm still learning plenty of things. After a couple thousand hours in that game, I am still learning things about how to do things, or how to make things a little bit more efficient, how to squeeze more FPS out of the game. And it's just all those little nuanced things, and I think that just comes with every game, right? You start out with playing the core gameplay loop, you learn how to play it, you learn how to play it well, and then you start to learn, okay, well, how can I squeeze extra X out of the game, right? Whether that's performance or squeeze extra scalability, and you come up with your own challenges as you play some games, right? And so that's my goal with pretty much every series, is to make sure that you guys are well informed. Is this a game for you? How does its modding scene look, if it has a modding scene? And yeah, just, go from there. Back to Dyson Sphere for a short couple bits. As you've probably seen in the background, we mainly have just been cleaning up a lot of things this episode, and we finally are getting closer to getting green science. And some of the things we need are the strange matter, which unfortunately we're not going to be able to get today, just because I don't have easy access. I think it's hydrogen. I'm pretty sure it's hydrogen. I don't have easy access to the hydrogen that it needs. And so because of that, it unfortunately doesn't get finished today. Now, I could try to route it through the local transport bot network, but I think it might just end up being too hard. I haven't really thought of how I'll solve the issue. I'm either going to transport it through the local logistics bots, or I'll just transport it on a belt. I also have to see how much I need, because if it's more than one belt, then of course that alters some things. I do want to overhaul the liquid storage area, and even though technically the hydrogen's a gas, I suppose one could argue it's stored in liquid form, but regardless, the liquid storage tanks I need to refine that area because of how many that I need to take out. Basically, I need to pull from the master tank. I need to figure out how to balance the load between all of the things that are pulling from it. I have a couple ideas for how I'm going to handle that, but I haven't really worked out anything concrete yet, and I'll probably have to experiment with a couple things to try to figure out a way to have it balanced properly so that one system isn't pulling all the fuel oil and nothing else is getting any, because that is something I've currently noticed with our setup is fuel oil goes to the end and doesn't go to any of the other basically systems that are pulling from it from the side, which is very problematic. Another thing that I'm looking at and are going to have to rework is the deuterium. So I was looking at this, the factorization one, and although initially I was like, oh, this seems pretty good, pretty solid setup. We feed hydrogen in, we get deuterium out, awesome, blossom, right? However, it appears that the amount of factorization machines I would need, I think is like 400 versus I think maybe 120 or something of the other production value. Now it's going to consume a lot more hydrogen that way, but the space savings here would be immense. I'll have to run the numbers and look at a few things because I only glanced at it at the end, but that will have to be next time. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a good one. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you guys did, you guys know what to do. See you guys in the next one.